gentlemen, we will call this meeting of the Silver City Planning and Zoning Commission to order and begin the meeting by rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and a roll call.
Commissioner Stevens?
Here.
Commissioner Seibel?
Here.
Commissioner Costello?
Here.
Commissioner Kara?
Here. All right, fantastic. We will move on to the approval of the agenda. You all have a copy of the agenda before you. Are there any changes that need to be made? All right.
None.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda of Tuesday, August 7th, 2018 as stands.
I second the motion.
All right, motion and a second. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We move on to the approval of minutes of the June 5th, 2018 regular meeting. And I guess I'll start. I can jack up the volume a little bit for you too. They let us do that. All right. The next item is the approval of minutes of the June 5th, 2018 regular meeting. And in the minutes, my name is spelled one way and then it's spelled another way. So it's right under the who was present at the beginning part. So if we could just have it spelled that way in all the places,
I will correct that.
that would be it.
Sorry.
Are there any other changes that need to be made? Spelled everyone else's name right, of course. All right. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as corrected. I mean the minutes of the June 5th meeting as corrected. Excuse me.
I motion to approve the minutes of the April 3rd meeting. June 5th. June 5th. Okay, sorry.
Do we have a motion?
I'll second the motion.
All right, motion second. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
I wasn't here, so I'm going to abstain.
Okay.
That's true.
Are you opposed to the final?
No.
Okay. So was that an aye?
And I start.
Okay. Okay, motion carries. It gets sticky if, Sam's not going to vote, and, yeah. All right, we have no old business on the agenda, which moves us then to public hearings. And public hearing ZC 18-02, a zone change for a chunk of College Avenue, more or less. So we'll begin with staff.
So we'll need to do the oath.
Okay, we can do that. Does somebody have the oath for me?
It's on the bottom of the sheet. Of the cheat sheet, I mean.
Oh, there it is. Cheat sheet. Thank you. That's lovely. All right. Very good. So to begin with, since this is a public hearing, I'll need to ask everyone who is present who thinks they might want to testify or speak to please come to the podium to be sworn in. Being sworn in doesn't mean that you have to testify, but unfortunately can't allow you to speak if you don't get sworn in. So if you think there's even the slightest chance that you might want to say something, just stand up and get sworn. You may as well. Because otherwise you'll get really motivated later in the meeting, and then we'll have to do this all over again, and it just gets awkward. So. All right. If I could get you all to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, and state your name. Do solemnly swear that the testimony I am about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, on penalty of perjury. All right, very good. And we will then move on to staff. Since you are the applicant and the staff, this will be fun.
Okay, so this is ZC 18-02. It's an amendment to the official zoning map from residential A to historic downtown commercial. Two property owners in the proposed zone change area approached the Community Development Department because their commercial properties are zoned as residential A. It was determined that the majority of the properties in the proposed change are commercial properties and would benefit from a zone change to historic downtown commercial. Property owners in the proposed zone change area were contacted and offered the opportunity to participate in the proposed zone change. Being zoned residential A can be an issue to a commercial property owner. The zoning limits the uses allowed for the property. Although the properties involved have had the same use before the Land Use Code of 2010, making them non-conforming, the zoning designation causes a problem for future sales of property or change of use. Changing the zoning to historic downtown commercial would give property owners more flexibility and would harmonize the properties with adjoining properties to the east. Section 3.1.6 of the Land Use Code states that the historic downtown commercial district is intended to accommodate a mix of commercial uses serving residents and visitors, mixed-use buildings and residential buildings in the historic central business core, and to provide a variety of building size compatible with the character of the Silver City Historic District. The district encourages a high level of vitality through diverse activity conveniently accessible to pedestrians. Page 3-22 of the Town of Silver City Comprehensive Plan states that success of infill development depends upon the town creating conditions that encourage more and better development within the town. A successful infill strategy will support the creation of livable neighborhoods and communities. So here is a map of the proposed zone change. The area that has the hashtags is the area that's being included in this proposed zone change. As you can see, the turquoise color to the east is commercial historic, so this would not cause a spot zoning. This was one of the properties, College Street Plaza, at 301 West College. We have 110, 114, and 116 West College Avenue. We have the grinder mill at 403 West College Avenue. We have the American Legion Hall at 409 West College Avenue. We have the Bright Funeral Home at 201 West College Avenue. We have this property on 902 Santa Rita Street. We have Smith Real Estate, 505 West College Avenue. And we have the Silver City Public Library at 515 West College Avenue. When the Planning and Zoning Commission makes its recommendation to the Town Council, and when the Town Council makes the final decision, they shall at a minimum make at least one of the following findings. The proposed amendment is in substantial compliance with the town's comprehensive plan. Number 2, the proposed amendment will not adversely affect the implementation of the goals and policies of the town's comprehensive plan. The proposed amendment is justified in order to correct a mistake in the town's comprehensive plan, an error in the assumptions about the property, surrounding uses, population forecast, rate of land consumption, or other factors. Number 4, the proposed amendment will not adversely impact the public health, safety, or general welfare, and will promote the original purposes of the Land Use Code. Number 5, the proposed amendment responds to change conditions such as change in assumptions on capital investments, road locations, population trends, land committed to development, density, use, or further studies that have been completed since adoption of the Land Use Code. Number 6, the proposed amendment is necessary in order to respond to state and/or federal legislation. And number 7, the proposed amendment provides additional flexibility in meeting the objections of the Land Use Code without lowering the standards of the Land Use Code. It's in the opinion of the Community Development Department that the zone change may be approved based on the following findings. Number 1, the proposed amendment is in substantial compliance with the town's comprehensive plan as stated in the analysis. Number 2, the proposed amendment will not adversely affect the implementation of the goals and policies of the town's comprehensive plan. Implementation Measure C Development Regulations/Zoning in page 3-24 states that the town should coordinate land use and community design, transportation, and economic development. The town's development regulations should reflect this integrated approach to planning, ensuring all new development has a beneficial influence on the quality of life to improve future opportunities for the community. The zoning map should be updated to reflect all categories and current uses. Number 4, the proposed amendment will not adversely impact the public health, safety, or general welfare and will promote the original purposes of the Land Use Code. This proposed change will stay aligned with the particular purposes of the Land Use Code, specifically Purpose 1.2.5, which states to encourage a more efficient use of land and public services and to reflect changes in technology of land development. And number 7, the proposed amendment provides additional flexibility in meeting the objectives of the Land Use Code without lowering the standards of the Land Use Code. This change will not adversely impact the adjoining properties because it will allow for a substantial use. It will not allow for a substantial use change, but will match the uses which currently exist. For example, a body shop or vehicle repair shop would still not be allowed in this proposed change, as it is in highway commercial. As required by Section 6.2.11 of the Land Use Code of 2010, the Community Development Department contacted the 85 property owners as identified by the Grant County tax roll within 300 feet of the affected area by mail about the proposed zone change. One property owner called to ask if her property was being included and what was being proposed. I let her know which properties were included, and I explained to her the change that was being proposed. Another citizen called because he saw one of the signs posted and asked which properties were affected. I let him know which ones were included and also the proposed change. Another property owner, Russell Wiegman, came in and asked about the letter he received. He lives at 906 North Grant Street. I explained to him what was being proposed, and he did not have any problem with it. I also met with Rebecca Margolis and Dale Steele. They live at 315 West 7th Street. They had concerns about the property involved turning into large developments. Jamie Embick, the Community Development Director, and we let them know it's not possible because of uses allowed in zoning, parking requirements, and lot size. They had other concerns, and we directed them to contact code enforcement. Dale Housley and Marcia Stout also came into the office to review the file. They had concerns about the adjoining properties to them. They bought their home because it's in a residential area, and they feel that this will impact that. I let them know that the changes could not be substantial enough to change that. They also wrote a letter, which I'll read. And I also spoke with Juliana Albershart, and she also wrote a letter that I'll read. So I have a letter dated July 31st, 2018 to the Town of Silver City Community Development Department and the Planning and Zoning Commission. States, we are sending this correspondence in response to the letter dated July 13, 2018, announcing a public hearing on August 7th regarding a requested zone change from residential A to commercial historic district for the properties described. We're sending this letter to be shared at this public meeting. Our comments addressed the area on the north side of College Street from Santa Rita Street to Grant Street. Although this rezoning proposal, as we understand, it does not include our property specifically, it includes commercial historic district zoning in an L shape around our property. Because our house and yard would be almost surrounded by this zoning in very close proximity, including 3 or 4 feet from some of our rooms, the bottom line is that it essentially is like being within CHD zoning. That concerns and distresses us. We are at home most of the time while gardening and enjoying the yard and porches. Some of the uses allowed in the proposed zoning would impact our day-to-day life. When we moved to Silver City, we were specifically looking for a historic house with a residential A zoned area. We bought in this neighborhood in good faith, not knowing there would be proposals to change zoning. We wanted to live within walking distance to the historic downtown business core, but knew that living downtown within such commercial zoning or immediately adjacent to it would not work for us. We live on Santa Rita Street, which is highly residential neighborhood. This area is within one of the existing town historic residential districts and already has the protections and benefits this affords, which we greatly appreciate. It is not in the historic central business core, but it is an approximate 10-minute walk from that area. It was not part of the downtown central business core historically, and we question whether or not it fits the definition for C-HD zoning. The changes proposed would mean that some impacting uses for such a residential neighborhood are allowed according to commercial historic zoning. Some examples include alcohol sales, retail and open container, dance or pool halls, entertainment, commercial parking, and more. Neighbors would have no ability to comment on such allowed uses. Some allowed and conditional use would substantially increase noise in the neighborhood, while some could increase use of major night lighting that disturbs residential neighbors, to mention just a few potential impacts. If rezoning were to be enacted, we have no idea what the use would be in 3 months or 5 or 10 years. For these reasons and others mentioned above, we oppose changing the zoning of the properties on this block. See paragraph 1 to C-HD. We fully understand the need to maintain and use buildings and are especially interested in seeing historic structures preserved. We also greatly appreciate the historic business core and walk downtown numerous times a week to dine, watch a movie, or shop. There's a number of uses within commercial historic that are quite compatible right next to residential A zoning, such as bed and breakfast establishments, also doable in residential A up to 4 units, and others. The problem is that commercial historic allows uses without input that are not compatible and instead impacting to residents essentially surrounded by it or living nearby. Regarding this rezoning proposal, we propose that a win-win strategy is applied rather than a one-side approach, which causes one party ongoing concern and distress. We think that this is the most reasonable and fair request. For example, come up with a way to officially ensure that commercial use of a large property will be a compatible use relative to the adjacent residents and neighborhood in residential A zoning, perhaps through creation of a buffer zone or some other method. Or more simply, retain residential A zoning, and if owners request a new use, a variance can be requested such that neighbors have the opportunity for comment and input. Sincerely, Marcia Dale Housley. I have one more letter to read. This one's from Juliana and Kurt Elbershart. They're at 918 North Santa Rita Street. It's dated August 7th, 2018. Planning and Zoning Commission in Town of Silver City. Having looked into the proposed zoning changes from residential A to commercial historic district outlined in your letter of July 13, 2018, we have some reservations concerning our Santa Rita neighborhood. While we applaud the Commission's efforts to make the zoning more representative of the present usage and a cleaner zoning map, zoning has impacts far beyond what look good on paper. We are concerned with zoning changes proposed for the north side of College Street between Grant and Santa Rita Streets that will directly impact our neighborhood. Santa Rita Street has always been a quiet residential street, much desired for its peacefulness and proximity to town. Current commercial uses on College Street allow our neighborhood to retain its quiet character. These businesses, such as Bright Funeral Home, are grandfathered in by their current usage and therefore do not need a zone change to continue operating. And looking at some of the uses that are currently prohibited that would be allowed under the new zoning, there are many that would cause undue hardship on property owners on our street. Many of our neighbors are elderly, some have heart conditions or other ailments that would make added noise, heavy traffic, or toxic exposure a potentially deadly risk for them. Some of these changes could imperil property values or destroy the peaceful enjoyment of our homes. Once the zoning changes are made, we will have no way to stop incompatible uses, and the city would be powerless to stop these uses without risking a lawsuit from property owners in the new zoning. Any reasonable request not included in residential A zoning could be addressed as a non-conforming use. Leaving the residential A zoning in this small area will allow residents and the zoning board to make the decision rather than have it made for us. Thank you for your consideration. Juliana Elbershart and Kurt Elbershart.
All right. That concludes your presentation?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I guess we will do for and then against, right? Is generally how we do this?
Yes.
All right. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in favor of this proposed zone change? All right. Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition to the proposed zone change? Right?
Good evening, Chairman Seibel and Commissioners. My name is Frank Drysdale. I live at 1017 Santa Rita Street in Silver City. I've lived in Silver City for about 20 years. I like the fact that Silver City has residential historic districts, and we chose Silver City based upon the preponderance of residential historic districts. My home is in the North Addition Historic District, and that district is primarily residential A and residential B, so there's a mix of housing. There's also some manufactured housing and mobiles and that sort of thing. And many houses have been completely renovated over the last 20 years that we've lived there. We've seen streets like 10th Street get just really improved tremendously. There have been 3 new single-family homes built, and there's been demographic changes. As I get older, I'm one of the older people now, but when we arrived, it was mainly longtime citizens like Miss Golding and Al Franks and others, and their properties became available. The Ryan family, the home I purchased, was after Mrs. Ryan's death in 1998. And so we've kind of recycled these homes, kept them heated, kept them repaired, and that sort of thing. And as a result, there's been a demographic change. Younger families have come in. When we arrived on Santa Rita Street, I don't think there were any children. And now there's children that have gone on to even college, and there's young children as well. So it's a very appealing area in that it's affordable housing. The price per square foot is less than you might find outside of town or a contractor-built home. Anyway, I went to the new land use code, and I had to find out why didn't I get a letter in the mail? Because my south boundary of my property is, excluding streets, is within the 300-foot notification. I see in the new land use code, the streets are no longer excluded. So you must be, and so I'm 335 feet away from the proposed changes. And I also looked at the use table and also the intent of the land use code. The intent of the zoning districts, for example, at 3.1.2 in your land use code, residential single-family RA district is intended to accommodate low-density and medium-density single-family and through conditional use approval, 2-family residential development, and provide land use protection for areas that develop in such a manner. And we've seen, as a result of people renovating homes and building new site-built homes, that's the development that is happening. Everything is pretty much occupied there. Residential B, single-family attached housing. Residential B, single-family attached and attached housing district is intended to accommodate low, medium, and moderate density, single-family, 2-family, and multifamily, and containing no more than 10 dwelling units, not including single-section manufactured homes, so on and so forth. Now, the proposed zone change which is now residential A on College with grandfathered uses, says the historic downtown commercial district is intended to accommodate a mix of commercial uses serving residents and visitors, mixed-use buildings and residential buildings in the historic central business core, and to provide a variety of building sizes compatible with the character of the Silver City Historic District. The district encourages a high level of vitality through diverse activities conveniently accessible to pedestrians. And that's one of the reasons that we selected Santa Rita Street to live on. Beautiful home, very walkable, highly residential. Now, what I'd like to, I made a list of what's allowed and not allowed, RA versus the historic thing. And I noticed in the presentation of staff that there was mention that there wouldn't be vehicle stuff or repair. Well, actually, vehicle sales and food service mobile unit not allowed in RA, but it's allowed in the commercial historic district with a conditional use permit. Gasoline station, convenience store, not allowed in RA, but allowed in the commercial historic district with a conditional use permit. All other vehicle service not allowed in RA, but allowed with a conditional use permit. And this has been how, you might say, downzoning happens. It's in an area through a conditional use permit, the nature of the property changes. And a good example is where Heckler's Copy Shop is on the corner of Grant and 12th. It is now Copies on the Run. Mr. Heckler passed away. But that was originally a gift shop, zoned residential B with a conditional use permit. Nick probably remembers the shop. Mr. Heckler then got the entire corner as well as maybe 3 or 4 other residential B units zoned commercial. The whole property, no longer the conditional use permit. So these things change the character of an area. So this takes away potential housing and that sort of thing. But what I would like to suggest to, I'll give this to the chair or whoever, but look at your use table and really see how dramatic a change it is to go from the residential uses like residential A and residential B. Most of residential B doesn't allow many of the activities that are proposed in the commercial historic. Now, we won't go through that. Also, I went to the website of the town and I found that the agenda and the legal notice for this proceeding was very cryptic, to say the least. There is no reference to the street numbers of the properties. Now, when I came in the room, it said College Street. There's nothing in this legal notice that says public hearing ZC 18-02, request for a zone change for a tract of land to residential A district, the historic downtown commercial district. And it uses the descriptions that you would see in the plats and the sort of thing that you would go to the county records. No street address. So you don't know where these properties are located. There was no diagram in the notice that would say, hey, this is what you're doing. There's no mention also of the North Addition Historic District. Now, one of the books that everyone in Silver City really likes is, of course, Built to Last. And in the back of Built to Last are the maps of the historic districts. One of the interesting features of College Avenue is that it forms the north boundary of the Silver City downtown district, you might say, and it forms the south boundary of the North Addition, where I live. And there's no mention of the North Addition Historic District. And it sounds like this is only going to affect what we look at as that central core business district of the map. To the outside viewer of this legal notice, you would not know where these properties are. You would not know where the immediately affected people are located, which are primarily residential. I think your staff could have done a better job at that. Also, what I should say is there have been previous attempts to rezone this area, and there was a lot of public interest. And I think notification area should have been expanded. There used to be a 500-foot radius, and in some cases, frankly, town-wide, where it's really important. And I think notification area should have been expanded because there are many residents that would have an interest in such a significant change to the zoning. And I listened to the letters that were read. I agree with what people are saying in those letters. And as I see it now, as it stands, I think you should either defer or deny the zone change request, because the businesses and those activities that are there have been grandfathered in. They're not going to go anywhere. And things like the library, it's a completely allowed use. Schools are allowed in residential A, conditional use permit for the library. You know, there's all sorts of things that are allowed in residential A. It's just that when you change or sell a property, and I can see a property, let's say, a small property with a big lot, being bulldozed, and then uses brought in that are allowed by statute in that use table, but may not be necessarily agreeable to the nearby residents. So anyway, that's my piece. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Frank. Whoever else would like to speak in opposition to the request, please step forward. And you pull that microphone down and speak into it if you would.
Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. My name is Paula Hughes, and I live directly across the street on Cooper Street from the library. And because even just in the last few months with the construction of College Street, just that one thing alone, I almost don't need to elaborate. It's very dangerous on our street where they come up, turn on Cooper, and then turn on 8th Street to go up to the university, and nobody is paying any attention to traffic safety, where they park. The parking at the library is already congested. The library has summer programs, and we have absolutely no parking. We have one driveway on the side, and it's hard for us because it doesn't feel residential anymore. We've had that house for 50 years, and we've seen the changes that I think the gentleman before me is talking about, that you really have to think about every aspect of commercial, historic district properties. I lived downtown in Silver City. I lived on Kelly Street, right just a half a block from Bullard. And downtown hasn't changed that much. The Gila Theater was right in front of my house. The coffee shop was right where, I used to have a coffee shop right there, where the coffee shop is now, right across from the co-op. That really hasn't changed. It can't change, because where are you going to park? What are you going to do? There's one little parking lot behind on Kelly that they've made, a parking lot where the lumber yard used to be. Nice area, well done. What are we going to do in our little neighborhood where that one little block it's almost too difficult for two cars to go? Cooper's a one-way street. And so, just the traffic I can see being, of consideration. But I don't know how that I've seen the business change on College Street. I've seen the two-story, what was Inc., that building, become commercial. The Premium Plaza wasn't there when we were there, and now it's there. They've got their own back parking, so that's pretty well established. What about the library? It's a biggie. the parking and the traffic and the people. They also come in the middle of the night and park in front on Cooper Street for the Wi-Fi. And they play that, whomever the people that are using it are, play music, talk, and get together, bring their groups, things you don't see during the day. And so the more people, the more commerce, the more that likelihood that in the future things could change. Even the parking at the library, that's the main, of course that affects us because we're just right across the street. But so we thought, Mrs. Turner, well, maybe we should ask for this other zoning, commercial. And I thought about it. I said, well, let's wait and see what happens at the meeting. If we ask for commercial zoning in the historic district, then that would have a domino effect to places, residents behind us. Thinking something up a gallery, that type of thing. So if something happens to that house, it could change. And that's just, I probably said a little much, but I think that it's something that the zoning committee has tried before in the past. They should really look, and I agree with the gentleman about informing people of the whole block, maybe even up the hill, where it goes up 7th Street, 6th Street, up on the hill, and all those people have residential housing. That's could change their sound. We hear the sound all day long. The big trucks are just incredible. When they did the bridge on Hudson, the big trucks came down Cooper. All the construction trucks, the school trucks, the bus trucks. We knew the bus schedule to the minute. Everything it affects more than just citizenry is very delicate. I've seen that in the last 50 years. So all those changes do affect everybody, I think, one way or another. I know that's not a technical opinion, but my conclusion would be that to really give it some more thought, make sure that it's looking toward the future changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in opposition to the request? Kurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kurt Eldershart. My wife and I live at 918 North Santa Rita Street, and I'm not in opposition to the proposal, just one of the boundaries in the proposal. I think historic downtown commercial is completely appropriate for the south side of College. I'm a little on the fence about the first block between Grant and Pope on the north side. It's currently part residential, part, I don't know, I think it's really residential at this point. But the two properties affected, the funeral home and the big house on the corner, are obviously been there for a long time. And the house on the corner has served as light commercial office space. It's currently residential with more than 4 rooms, I think. Not a problem. But the permitted uses in that historic downtown commercial zone include bars, restaurants, pesticide purveyors, a number of things that really don't fit with that neighborhood. And so I would prefer to see on that north side of the block a permit by exception rather than permit by rule. I just wanted to say that there were maps included with the mailings that were sent to the residents, but it was impossible to tell from the town website or the signs posted anything about what was going on. It's just a yellow sign with a number on it. So that might be able to be improved, as Frank suggested. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up.
My name is John Barnes. I live at 210 West 7th. 107th in Arizona. What I really wanted to know is why do we want to zone College Avenue commercial when we've got 40 plus or 40, more or less 40 buildings empty in the old downtown area? Now, I've been here since 1965, and really downtown's getting to be a ghost town. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. All right. Any other speakers in opposition? All right. That takes care of the input. Let's turn to the commission. Generally speaking, we probably ought to have a motion to discuss. If anyone feels comfortable doing that. Otherwise, I guess we could just go into general conversation. But under the rules of these sorts of things.
I voted we discuss CC 1802, and if you would like, I will read through the list of lots, et cetera, which are included.
Just, I would suggest maybe that we make a motion to approve it, not saying that we're going to approve it, but just so that we have a motion to discuss.
So it's to recommend it.
Well, to recommend approval to the town council, that's true, because we don't actually change the zoning map. Thank you.
I'm not comfortable doing that.
I believe the commission can ask staff questions or ask questions before we...
Okay. Well, if that's the way you want to handle it. I mean, Robert's Rules of Order, we really shouldn't be having discussion without having a motion on the table to discuss. So, since I'm chairing the meeting, I would be most comfortable if we would have a motion.
I'm comfortable making a motion to recommend, what is this, ZC 18-01, request for zone change for attractive land from residential A district to historic downtown commercial district.
You have to read all that.
I know.
Sorry.
Can I read this part here? Yeah, there we go. And this is, anyway, I would like to make a motion to recommend approval of ZC 18-02, a request for zone change for attractive land from residential A district to historic downtown commercial district, described as lots 1 through 16 of block 177 of Fraser's survey of the town of Silver City, lots 1 through 16 of block 176 of the Fraser survey of the town of Silver City, lots 1 through 16 of block 175 of the Fraser survey of the town of Silver City, Fraser block 201, lot 2, and that's part of lot 4 and part of lot 6. Oh, goodness. So center 50-foot, lot 2, part of lot 4, part of lot 6, 0.133 acres. Fraser block 201, lot 2, and part of lot 4, and part of lot 6, east 45 feet of lot 2, east 45 feet of the southern 30-foot and eastern 27-foot, and north 20 feet, lot 4, east 27 feet of lot 6, 0.126 acres. Fraser block 201, lot 2, and part of lot 4, the western 55-foot, lot 2, south 14.1 feet of west 55-foot, lot 4.081 acre. Fraser block 202, lot 1 through parts of lot 6, east 41.32, lot 2, east 41.32 foot of south 43, and east 26.4 of north 7, lot 4, east 26.4, lot 6.65 acre. Fraser block 202, lot 2, and part of lot 4, lot 2, lot 4.22 acre. The applicant is the town of Silver City. I see nothing confusing about that.
So, I just wanted to... So, we have to use legal notices instead of addresses because addresses change. So, if an address was changed and later on somebody was trying to decipher, because this goes to an ordinance, and somebody was trying to decipher where this change happened, they wouldn't be able to with an address. So, for the rules, we have to use legal descriptions, as confusing as it is.
So, just 1 second. Can I get a second for that motion? Before we go any further.
I second the motion.
Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, we have a motion and and second. Now, Priscilla, thank you, sorry.
That was it, I'm sorry. I just had to clear up why in the legal notice we have to use legal descriptions and not addresses.
So now we're discussing?
Now we're discussing the motion, yes.
So, yeah, I think, I just want to affirm that I appreciate that input.
Before we go on, just a question about that. Does that preclude then putting addresses in, or is that just, would the rules then preclude you from printing the addresses in addition to abiding by the letter?
I can present them, but in the legal notice, which is used as part of the ordinance, I don't know if you've ever seen an ordinance, they use this exact verbiage. That's why it has to be used. I can present the address because that's what it is now, but later on, if somebody that worked for staff was trying to decipher which lots this change happened to, they wouldn't be able to know by an address. They'd have to know by a legal.
But for the public concern that's been already communicated, is that possible to do that in future to avoid having ambiguity of the kind we've heard about tonight?
I believe in the letters written, the signs that are posted states they can call us, which a few people did, as to where it was taking place. But
It might be, just to speak to that point, I think it's definitely worth pursuing it, because that was what I was tongue-in-cheek referring to, that is a lot to deliver in what we've heard. And, I know in real estate, one of the things we do is we use the addressing that's there. We, of course, have to refer to legal addresses when we're dealing with legal documents, because that's how titles transfer and all that sort of thing. But, of course, nobody sells their property or buys their property according to their legal description, at least in their head. And to the extent that's possible, I think that's really
yeah, in the future, the letters that I send out to property owners, we can include addresses. That's not a problem. But in the ordinance, it has to have the legal description.
Yeah. And certainly when it comes to the legal notices, they get published on the website or elsewhere. You have to have the required legal information.
Yes.
But there's nothing that I think prohibits you from adding additional explanatory information. And certainly from my perspective, I think the more you include in the legal notice, the better we are.
Yeah.
Because of course, the ones that go on the paper you pay for. So, that having been said,
I guess I'll kick things off. I think a lot of, one observation I just want to make right off the bat is that, I think the fact that there are, multiple parties here, both who submitted letters in writing, in opposition to and have, made the effort to be here to speak against the proposed change, and that we have nobody present to speak in favor of, and there's potentially, if I've got the count right, somewhere around 9 or 10 parties, that would be affected by this, in my mind, is a good place to start in terms of some of my thinking on it. I'll just say that sort of for future reference for ordinance changes. I think the fact we have nobody here to speak for it is one point in my mind that sort of needs to be noted. And I also, I think a lot of the things that have been brought up, I think are also problematic for me as well in terms of considering the merits of this. I think the little enclave that's created there, that little residential A enclave, is troublesome to me. The fact that the north and the southern boundaries there, clearly those areas are existing, that use is there and they're not going to be changed anytime soon. I do feel a little bit, while I appreciate the perspective of zoning changes, my gut inclination at the moment, without being convinced otherwise, is that it's a little bit of square peg round hole kind of working here. I don't necessarily think that this is the solution that's needed for this area. That's just my
Who actually in the community requested the changes?
So College Street Plaza, the owner is Bruce McKinney, and then the owner of Smithville Estate, which is Becky.
Okay. So they requested the specific changes to historical commercial or to another use, and historical commercial was
They
used. Makes sense?
originally Mr. McKinney wanted it to be mixed use, which we didn't want to do a spot zoning. So we compared that to commercial historic. Commercial historic has more residential uses than the mixed use, so we thought that would be better.
Okay. Okay. And
so the properties that are already there, the lot sizes, there are development standards that businesses would have to meet if they wanted to go in and build something there. So these lot sizes don't really suit large developments that I know a lot of the property owners are afraid that would go in there. They need to have a certain amount of parking that wouldn't even be able to happen in any of these properties. That's why we figured it's a change, yes, in zoning, but a lot of things that they would want to come in and do wouldn't be allowed because of the lot size.
And then presently, historical commercial is where the business previously known as LifeQuest, which is now closed. That building is in historical commercial.
That one is already.
The brasserie next to it is also in historical commercial.
Yes.
I think the HMS building maybe as well. And then this area on the map that I'm looking at, there's a blue section that I'm referring back to, is all part of the original, when we originally did the historical commercial and did this configuration. And it abuts right next to what would be, I think, the grinder.
The grinder is in the middle. That one's on the middle after Pinos Altos Road.
Okay,
This is College Street Plaza.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is the grinder.
Oh, sorry.
And then,
I've got them
So the
flipped in my
grinder
mind.
mill, the property is owned by the American Legion. So they own that whole block.
Okay. So it abuts right now then next to College Street Plaza. That is already historical commercial.
College Street Plaza is residential A, right?
Yes, but
yes.
the property right next to it. I just wanted to make that clear to the audience that it's already there. It's not a brand new zoning that is being considered. It's one that's actively enforced right up abutting to these properties.
Right.
It would be an extension of that.
Yes.
But it's not that it's 6 blocks away and then you would have a gap. It is immediately adjacent at the present time.
Yes.
That's all. I just wanted to make that clear. And the requesters were both on the opposite side of College Street from where the residents of Santa Rita are concerned about. Okay, thank you.
So, I've been listening to the audience and read the letters, of course, and the very compelling information. And I do have to say that my main concern relates to the research that has been echoed in terms of the residents whom we've been hearing about, that talks about home values associated with walkability and mobility and safety. And we've clearly heard, just in terms of the construction that's happening now on College, concerns about safety. We know that from the table that we actually have been given, I know somebody from the audience that had been asking about the use table, we were given a use table comparing the two zoning options. And, those things already discussed, like a liquor store, a pool hall, the possibility under certain conditions of a automotive body shop. These are things that could bring considerable traffic to that area. And I'm looking at at what was written under section 3.1.2 in the analysis section. The district encourages high level of vitality through diverse activities conveniently accessible to pedestrians. So pedestrians under convenient, I'm trying to understand if that includes safety, because that is what the research shows consistently. The safety is what people are looking for when they purchase a new house in an area to live in, and especially retirees, according to the ARP, that's paramount. It's number 3, I think, or number 2, I forgot. is the safety in terms of mobility without a vehicle. And so I'm trying to understand the town of Silver City's in terms of community development, where safety fits into this, especially when we talk about livable neighborhoods as per page 3 through 22 under the comprehensive plan. Because I wonder, for example, was there an analysis done, any kind of historical data on pedestrians that have been injured in some way by vehicles in that area?
No, we didn't do any kind of analysis of that, no.
Right, and so that, I think, would be very helpful toward, when these things come in, to get an understanding of where safety comes in, given what we've been hearing from the audience, and where the analysis was done that would look at safety, because it seems to be such an important factor, and we've heard it tonight, not just the research, but clearly we've heard it from people who live in that area, some of them who are out of that area that was notified.
Right.
I just want to add too that while I appreciate the analysis that certain activities with current lot sizes may not be allowed, I also have a little bit of reluctance in how comfortable I am with that, and just in terms of that things can you can purchase multiple lots, you can tear down buildings, you can, I guess just I have a little bit of queasiness about the idea that, and I think it's a concern that's been raised, and I share that concern that things may not, just because something looks like it does right now, doesn't mean that it won't, at a future date, be bulldozed and something else that just narrowly conforms to what it needs to be, or that you buy one lot for the parking lot, you buy the other one for the construction, and all of a sudden, because we have a newly zoned area, we've been able to, the unintended consequence of allowing for that kind of activity in an area that was never really intentioned for that. I'm in full support of the existing businesses that are there. I just want to sort of express the slippery slope concern of College Street, at what point does it go down? Do you just kind of keep going down the road and keep expanding zoning, at least for what we're doing, for this body? I feel like a little bit more, my comfort's not with it.
Well, that's why, for this body, I think it's important we look at who our requesters were and what they have requested, because they have requested a change in zoning usage, specifically for Smith and for College Street Plaza. And I appreciate the concern expressed by the residents. The particular Cooper Street issues are very different than Santa Rita's issues, but I appreciate the concerns expressed by everyone. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that the College Street Plaza and Smith Realty are requesting a zone change. And we recommended, the town recommended, that be the commercial historic district, because that put them in line with mixed residential use in a better, because that's the whole point of the commercial residential. You have commercial and you have residential, and you encourage both for walkability and for safety. There are, sidewalks and everything on this part of College, at least. So I don't want to lose sight of that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I guess I just, I also have a tendency to wonder, anytime we're taking into account these zoning changes or variances, and to me, this one just feels very severe. This feels like a fairly large one. That, why that wasn't taken into account originally, when this was originally done. That was, these were zoned residential A, and at that time, when somebody's drawn the zoning maps, these businesses were in operation, and so why was it not done at that point? And again, also, I think it's a very valid concern about the residents, and I think the answer is sort of, well, you're there, we can't rezone you, you're already here. We're talking about future use. And so that's sort of, I think, what we are talking about now is reversing that in a way. We're changing that decision. And I do think the point really is, I'm with you a little bit. I guess I could be convinced on the southern side just because of the nature of those buildings, although I'm not really 100% convinced on that. I'm also very troubled about the north boundary, that's been raised and brought up, and I think that is a really valid concern, that and this is an example of how these things start to expand from one business or another saying, hey, I want to do that, or I want to do that too, or why don't we just get the whole block involved, and, maybe we're not fully understanding the impact. We're completely redrawing this isn't just a little, like, hey, we left out the corner lot, and we should just readjust. This is like it feels like it's spilling out a bit when I see this map and when I consider what we're doing, and so that's where my reluctance comes in. Not for zoning changes, per se, but just the scope of this. And again, I mean, I'm just going to say that. I'm not comfortable with it.
I appreciate the input, and I guess I'm going to jump in here too. Just point out at this moment that I hate being chair. Really frustrated the hell out of me. That aside, when I look at this application, I get very frustrated because I hear everything that everyone has said, and I hear the letters, and I certainly agree with some of the concerns, understand the concerns. I also look at this zone change, and I look at this zone in particular. And to me, what we're doing tonight represents about 20 years worth of work on the part of the people that have sat at that table and the people that have sat behind this counter. This has been a long time dream in this community because, I'm going to be honest, when zoning was originally implemented in Silver City, it was very poorly done. And we all know that. We've been dealing with the repercussions of that. Lines were arbitrarily drawn through the middle of lots. So to impute some great foresight on the part of our forefathers who drew these zones, I think, is maybe a little more than they deserve. So I'll say that. I'll also say that the idea behind developing these more differentiated, more finely attuned zones was to not only make the zone sort of representative of what was inside of them. So in other words, to be able to draw zoning boundaries that sort of look like what's there, but also to be able to allow us to perpetuate the kind of community that we really like. I mean, when I go back 20 years, there was residential A and there was residential B, and that's what there was. And residential A meant that you had a 20-foot setback everywhere, so that if a house burned down in an old part, up on Chihuahua Hill, and it was zoned residential A, like you would have to build a new house with a 20-foot setback, which was physically impossible on those lots. I mean, everything was designed on this suburban model, which was not representative of the kind of community that we have. When we look at these blocks that we're talking about here on College Avenue, the Smith Real Estate Building has been used for various commercial uses since long before there was zoning. I mean, it was a nursing home when I was a kid. It was a medical clinic prior to that. What's now the Bright Funeral Home was the Curtis Bright Funeral Home, was the Curtis Funeral Home, was the Cox Mortuary. That dates back to the late 1940s. The grinder mill was the Ranch Burger, which was built in the early 1950s as a temporary use. All of this stuff predates zoning in this community. And all of this stuff predates every person sitting in this room owning this particular property, with the possible exception of one person in the room. And, I mean, honestly, I don't think any of these things are bad. This is what makes College Avenue great, is this kind of mix. And to say, well, we have to leave this zone residential A because we have to have this control, I think would really be selling ourselves short in terms of how we could develop as a community. This is an important corridor, and I have a hard time saying, oh, we're going to increase traffic on College Avenue. Nothing that we do on College Avenue is going to increase traffic more than Western New Mexico University. Like, that anchor that is pulling cars up that street, whatever else happens there, is not going to contribute to traffic more than what's already up there. And to me, when we're talking about safety, when we're talking about building a better community, the question is, well, how do we slow that traffic down? How do we encourage people to walk from these neighborhoods to the university, to downtown? How do we build this kind of community that we want to have? And I think sort of thoughtful development in a mixed-use sort of way of, nice pedestrian-oriented type development is what we need to see on College Avenue going forward. I mean, we've got things like the parking lot that's adjacent to the funeral home. Eventually, something's going to get built there, I hope. It's too good a piece of property to just have it set there as unused asphalt 98% of the time. And so many wonderful things could happen there that would be great for the neighborhood and for the community as a whole. And to me, we worked really hard to tailor this mixed use, this historic district commercial, to allow those sorts of things to happen. And so that's certainly where I am in terms of this, and I'll put that out there for the rest of you.
So, I appreciate certainly the sentimental journey into what was on college all those years. We are talking about now, though, and I think we're talking about the research that the AARP and others are putting out that are relevant to our community and to the residents of those neighborhoods, and to Commissioner Stevens' comments regarding the connection between the historical connection to downtown and the CHD district, commercial historic district. That logic seems to be opposite of how I see it. I see it that this was a non-conforming area, that this was an exception given to a residential area around there. And so this would be severing, in essence, the connection to residential in ways that we can't predict. And I think we've heard that from the people there. Say the parking lot that you're speaking of. What if that was a liquor store? That traffic wouldn't go up to college. I mean, to the university. It could if they were coming from there and they're going home. But it could just go in and go through the neighborhoods. There's plenty of reason to believe that. Or let's say the corner house on Santa Rita, that very large building. If that were something more commercial, it could also be a liquor store, be torn down. That would also suggest lots of traffic next door to residential homes that is not there today. So in other words, changing these rules as a result of making an exception is not reconnecting. That's disconnecting. Reconnecting would be if they were already there and they were severed. But that's not what we're speaking of. We're speaking of a different development that happened, a sequence of events. There was a residential neighborhood. Clearly, when you look at the Smith Building, you can see that. That was once a home where people lived, and it's not any longer. That's a severing of the past. That's not a reconnection to something, So I don't understand the logic that making this commercial, connecting to an area that has lots of vacancy, as we've heard, would somehow be rational.
The commercial historic district, it could be commercial or it could be residential. I live in that district. I went to refinance my house and suddenly I was told it was a commercial building. They couldn't refinance it. I bought it as a residence, but it was suddenly a commercial building. When the commercial historic district went in and my house was covered, I have the rights of it for residential use, or I guess the rights of it for commercial use. So I don't see the same severing that you do with that, nor would I see it with the Smith Building if someone wanted to buy that property and make it a house, because that is allowable under the commercial historic district. So I wanted to kind of clear that up. Also, just because it frustrates me a little for people to think that downtown is vacant. We only have a 10% vacancy rate in the buildings that are vacant. The people that own them are trusts predominantly. They don't not live in Silver City, and they use them as tax write-offs. So although the town has done a lot to try and correct that situation, there are private property rights. So I'm all for saying I would be fine with College Street Plaza to the library as being part of the commercial historic district. I'm in total agreement that the properties on the other side probably need a lot more discussion. Particularly when half of them, although commercial residential would allow them to remain residences, and they abut to actual physical commercial buildings.
So I also wanted to add, these properties are in historic districts. So the town, there was a historic design review committee. That committee, any type of renovation, demolition, any type of change, exterior especially, to any building goes through them, and they are usually very opposed to any type of change in a historic building. So for example, that property on the corner of College and Santa Rita, if somebody went to them and said they were going to demolish it and put a liquor store, that's not going to add to the feel of that historic district, so it wouldn't be approved anyway. So I just wanted to add that. There's a lot of other processes that have to be done instead of just now they're allowed to go demolish something and build something. It's not that easy.
I appreciate your optimism. I'll point out that the Historic Design Review Committee is pretty toothless. But
Could you say that louder into the mic?
but that having been said, I mean, one of the big boogeymen is the idea that you're going to tear down a bunch of buildings and combine lots. And that is the one power that the Historic Design Review Commission has, is that they can impose a 6-month moratorium on issuance of a demolition permit for a property. I mean, basically, to give you time to talk them out of it or someone to try to buy it out from under them. There's a lot of obstacles to doing that. And I know this isn't what anyone wants to hear, but frankly, I would be thrilled if we had that kind of economic activity, that someone was motivated to do that. I think realistically, all of us know that that is not what's going to happen. I'd love to see a liquor store, frankly, but the liquor laws in New Mexico are so terrible that that is never going to happen either. So I'd like a small bar where I could go have a drink. That's also not going to happen.
Well, and I just, I guess, part of this is just that I do think that as presented as in the process that we're in terms of the outcome, I have a little bit more trouble with the process and the outcome, at least right now. I think, because I also think that given where we are with the proposal in front of us, the request in front of us, I don't know that we have to vote this up or down, recommending yes or no, and I don't think we have process-wise. I mean, I guess suppose we could make some of our own conditions and say we approve the south side or the north side. We'd have to figure out which ones are south and which ones are north, and I'm not going to read that. But that would be you know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of from a process perspective, I'm happy to have the discussion, but I also think there's a lot more community input and a lot more community discussion for something this big. And it gets back to my earlier point of I really wish that there had been, of these property owners, at least one of them who would show up tonight to advocate for this position. And you don't have to tell me anything about scheduling or why anybody couldn't have been here. We're all here. Other people came here. This is a monumental thing. This is a zoning change. And I think we should take it seriously. And obviously some people came here to take it seriously. And just for that fact alone, I'm very reluctant to recommend approval. Notwithstanding the other concerns that I have. And so in addition with those other concerns, I'm ready to vote, but that's where I lie.
So I have a question for staff. I think we all can kind of tell the direction that this is going to go. Would your preference be for us to vote this down and then have you come back with a smaller version of it that perhaps could pass the commission? Would you prefer that we postpone this until next month's meeting and you come back with some sort of modification to it? What would your preference be?
Well, whether it's recommended or not, it would still go to council, and they're the decision maker. So even if you go against this recommendation, it'll still go through the whole process of public hearing, of the legal notice, of the property owners being contacted, of signs being posted. It's going to go through the same whole process again, and the town council will be the decision maker.
Right.
So,
But I'm just saying, it's going to go to the council one way or another, but these same folks and maybe
Right.
some other people are going to show up to the council meeting.
yes,
And to see the council pass this over a recommendation from us not to pass it in the face of public opposition, I think would be a pretty remarkable thing. So, do you want to salvage some of the work that you have done by bringing us back something smaller?
if you're all, it would be a postponing of it, but I guess it's not gonna, either way, whatever you decide, I don't mind the work being put into it. I'm fine doing the research and working, so it's,
Is it possible that we propose, and I believe that, and someone in the audience will correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that the houses, the funeral home, and that lovely big brick building on the corner of College and Santa Rita would be the north side of
Yes.
College. Could a proposal be made to accept the changes to the south side of College?
yeah, so if you want to only propose the other properties and not those can get recommended, the council would still be the final decision maker, but
Absolutely.
they would have your input as to why.
Absolutely.
As to why you don't want to include those.
Because if not, we're going to be hearing from at least two of these properties. The city owns one of the properties,
Yeah.
and the other had no objection to getting its zone changed.
Right.
We're just going to be hearing from them individually about individual spot zoning changes, which I am less in favor of than a comprehensive zone change. So I would make a proposal that we reject the properties on the north side of College, and we accept the properties on the south side of College as requested in
So, just point of order, I'm not good with Robert's Rules of Orders, but maybe I'm supposed to say point of order. I think there's a motion on the table.
There is. So what I was just going to suggest was that if I were you, I would propose an amendment to the motion, eliminating, and I think you can tell me the answer to this question, but all of the blocks, it's block 201 and 202,
Yes.
are the ones that are on the north side.
Yes, so the first ones that are usually read, lot 1 through 16.
Right.
The first three, those are the ones that are on the south side. All of the rest that are just portions of lots, which is why they are that way, are the ones that are on the north side.
So I would recommend
we do an amendment. We're not, we
that
don't
you
normally do the
that you
motion
move
first,
to
right?
amend the
Okay.
motion. But this is really the way that we should do it.
Yes, Nicholas.
I know it's more complicated, but...
I recommend an amendment to the motion for ZC 1802 to reject the properties,
What,
block 201 and 202, and accept lots 1 of block 16 of the Fraser, 177, 176, and 175 of the Fraser survey for the proposed zone change.
So we would be recommending that the council approve the 170s and that they disapprove the 200.
Right.
I wanted to get to you before you said all those things.
Yes, sir.
Is that clear enough?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Do we have a second to the motion to amend? Do we have a second?
I will second the motion.
Okay, we've got a second to amend the motion. Is there any further discussion on the motion for the amendment?
Yes, I'm confused. We have an audience that showed up from the neighborhood stating, looking down these different criteria that have been put before us and have demonstrated that these are not valid in different ways to them, the residents who live there.
Sure.
we have nobody showing up from the other side who wants explicitly the zone change. We have only opinions right now, other than that.
Right.
So this is an opinion with really no research behind it, missing facts in terms of safety, which has been echoed here many times, the safety of that community, of that neighborhood. And we're going to go forward with a motion that now we interpret to be why? I don't understand this currently.
Any further discussion on the motion?
I will simply say that in both the letters, the unwritten letters, both the parties, it's said that their concern is with the north side of College, not with the south side of College.
May I respond to that, or? That still does not address the safety concerns that we've been hearing about and the lack of data that we clearly know was not collected about the safety implications of that. So I don't know, saying you don't mind is not the same thing as saying I endorse that. That's quite a leap, and we're assuming that, I think, at this point, that somebody's endorsing that. No one in this room has endorsed anything at this point.
Thank you, Commissioner Carroll. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, we'll take a vote on the motion to amend the motion on the table. The amendment being to recommend approval of the rezoning on the south side of College Avenue and to recommend against rezoning the north side of College Avenue. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
I'm opposed. Yay, I'm opposed.
Nay. Okay. So we've got a tie vote, which means that the motion fails. So we're back to our original motion, which is to recommend the approval of the zone change as it's presented. Is there any further discussion on the original motion? All right. Hearing none, call for a vote on that motion. All those in favor of the motion to recommend approval of the zone change to the town council, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
All right, the motion is defeated. And that takes care of it. Do we need a roll call vote on that?
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll do that officially.
Commissioner Stephen?
Nay.
Commissioner Seibel?
Aye.
Commissioner Costello?
Nay.
Oh, you just have to say President, right? Commissioner Carroll?
Nay.
All right, very good. And we will move on to new business. First off, thank you all so much for coming. You are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. But really appreciate you guys taking the time to come out tonight and engage in this process. And I will remind you that it will go on, even though we voted to recommend against approval, this will continue on to the town council because that's how it works. So make sure you pay attention to the mail and the signs and the newspaper for when that hearing is set, because you will need to do this again at that time. So thank you again.
Along with the individual requests that will come in now, too.
All right, very good.
If you
Do you need a break?
Okay.
Well, then we will move on to our next order of business, which is elections for a new chair and vice chair. And so I will open nominations for chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I nominate Nicholas Seibel for the chair.
I second that.
Are there any other nominations for chair?
No, not that I can think of.
All right, then I will nominations for vice chair.
I recommend Sam Costello for vice chair.
I second that.
All right, any other nominations for vice chair?
Can I decline?
I mean, you can, but that means I get to decline. All right, so we have One nominee for chair, one nominee for vice chair.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
In the case of, let's say, a nominee who's not entirely committed, as we're hearing, is there some kind of information that you can inform us on regarding the duration of time that there's a commitment? In other words, we're looking for another commissioner at this time. Should another one be appointed, would there be an opportunity for that person to be considered as vice chair, for example, or as chair, should the one or the other party's nominees not want to continue in that role?
Generally, our practice has been to January of every year, sort of put on or around the beginning of the year, put on the agenda, who would be the chair, the vice chair. Certainly, if you are chair or vice chair, you're well within your rights to step down from that position at any time you'd like to do that. So certainly, if you found a sucker, was that too broad? I don't know. Then you could step aside, I think, at any time if you've got someone you think the commission likes better.
Yeah, and I would just tell you guys that I appreciate the nomination by, whatever you call it, by doing it before I can nominate one of you.
You can still nominate one of them. I said I'm not wholly sure of my.
Just have a lot going on right now. Maybe leave it at that since this is televised. And I honestly, like in all honesty, I will give it a shot if that's what we want to do. But I may not be the right person for the role right now. So,
All right.
All any of us can do is serve until we can no longer serve.
I'm not sure that I can even do it right now, but that's just letting you guys know that.
May I ask a question of Commissioner Stephen? Should the vice chair need to step down, do you feel that you would be in a position to fulfill that role because of the stresses that we're hearing that may require that?
If I had to, yes, I would. I would certainly want some coaching, though. I wouldn't want to just show up one night and have Nick not be here. I would certainly want a little bit of training on it because, for example, tonight, I would have gone by the method we had always used in the past, which is we didn't bring up a motion until the end of all the discussion. I wouldn't have caught that. And the cheat sheet will need to be changed to reflect that. Could I do it? Yes. Do I also do a lot of other things with the community? Yes. And quite frankly, I don't want to put Sam in a position that absolutely makes him uncomfortable either. I'll be very blunt about that.
And I would agree with everything you've said and echo that same statement that was just made.
I mean, to be honest with you guys, like, now may not be the right time for me to take on something new. 6 months from now, maybe, but at this point, I'm just saying.
You just have to make sure that I don't miss a meeting, and then you don't have anything to do, Sam.
Are you good at arm twisting, Sam?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, I'm just expressing that I have multiple reasons why it may not be a good idea for me to be, I'm advocating against my nomination and election as vice chair. Just putting that out there. So.
Well, again, as Commissioner Stevens said, if you do not feel comfortable with it, neither of us would like you to take that on. We're looking at you in terms of your capacity, your ability that we have witnessed.
Sure. Yep. Okay. You guys, I'm not gonna say anything else on. on the record.
Well,
as far as what I'm saying.
you're going to get railroaded unless you say you don't want it. So decline it now.
Well, I would like to decline it. I would be happy to step up later. I'm happy to do it as needed, but I'm really and truly, guys, I have once the mics are off, you wanted me to tell you what's going on in my life, I'll tell you.
Okay. All right, then I'd like to nominate Carmen Stephen for vice chair.
I second that.
All right. Thank you, Carmen. All right, we have just a lone motion for each chair and vice chair, unfortunately. So all those in favor of the slate, as it were, I guess say aye.
Aye.
Are those opposed? All right, sounds like the motion carries. We do not have a community forum on the agenda. Are we ever going to do a community forum again?
That's up to you. You want to?
May I say something before we go on to the next topic?
Sure.
Thank you, both of you, and thank you, Sam, and Commissioner Costello. I appreciate, your professionalism and the ability to move this commission forward. I really do. This is very important. We have disagreements, maybe, as tonight. Maybe we don't all have the same perspective, but my respect for the chair and for the vice chair is enormous. I want to stress that, and my support is here for the commission and also for the Commissioner Costello.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is, I discovered tonight, very unfun to be the chair sometimes. So, do we want to do community forums? Does anyone have a topic? Should we talk about legal notices for zone changes, or I don't know. I mean, there are lots of things out there that we could discuss. I would like to figure out how we can take a step forward, because I do feel like tonight was a real missed opportunity, in that I feel like this, at least I as a commissioner have been advocating for us to move towards implementation of some of these new zones that we have. And this to me is along the lines of that. And I know that there's not full agreement on that, but I also think, we got some folks here that I think had some very good objections. Obviously, there are some people that are in favor of it that didn't turn out. There are some people who stand to benefit from it, and they weren't here. I also know that, for instance, this sort of thing is in line with what the leadership of the university has been looking to do in terms of, developing that college and town physical relationship that all of these College Avenue improvements that are causing us so much headache now are meant to foster.
Right.
So I really feel like we only discussed one small aspect of it. And I would recommend, if nothing else, that between now and whenever this goes before council, that there is maybe an effort somehow to raise the profile of this particular case, because I think it deserves a more full discussion than we were able to give it here tonight. I think Commissioner Kara brought up some fine concerns about, the impacts on safety and walkability. My gut tells me that this is a great move in that department, but that's just a gut move, as it was pointed out tonight. I don't have any hard data to point to that.
Like, when we've done variances, we stick straight to the findings, because those are the rules.
Right.
So that's why I've made a point to answer every finding, which I did.
Right.
So for zone changes, only one had to have been met.
Right.
So we just always want
I think we
to...
met 4 of them as well. Yeah.
I just want to go back to that, and I'm doing more research. I haven't been doing this very long as
Right.
far as planning and zoning, but it's helping me answering them for myself so that I can help answer for anyone else. So, I just wanted to as far as the findings go.
I don't mean it as a criticism. I don't mean to criticize you about this. I don't even know that it's necessarily your job, but I do think that this is some of that big picture sort of capital P planning that I feel like the Planning and Zoning Commission and really the Community Development Department really does too little of. We tend to be very reactive to things that people want to do instead of looking at the tools that we have available to us to build the sort of community that we want to see built. And these sorts of zone changes, these rewrites of the land use code, this sort of making the sieve finer and finer and figuring out how we make it look like our community, I think is a big part of our job. And somehow we just didn't quite get there. And so I think we have to articulate the legal descriptions and all those sorts of things too, but somehow we need to also communicate the larger vision behind why we're doing what we're doing. And I didn't get that at all tonight.
So, I mean, that's what I was getting at, actually. I mean, and for that vision to be realistic, and for the university's vision, and I'm at the university, and, you know, one of the things that Dr. Shepard, the president, speaks about is traffic calming. And the research, you know, if you look at the kinds of businesses that we're talking about that could be there, whether it's a liquor store or a restaurant or any number of other new businesses, the big danger that mobility, in terms of mobility walking, is vehicles turning in and out of spaces and cutting over across the sidewalk. And this is where most accidents happen, or collisions. You know, bit of history, and I don't know if that disqualifies me in some way, but my son was actually hit on that street. That's why I know it's a very dangerous street. And, you know, Broadway and Bullard, that has been changed to a four-way stop sign because of a death, pedestrian death, a fatality.
So I want to add the construction they're doing on College, they're going to be adding street lights there.
Right.
I don't know if you knew
To
that.
College, the street lights, right, that's going to help illuminate, but it does not change
Right.
the traffic flows. This is the number one issue for retirees. You know, and this is where I think we need to, when we talk about our community, that's what I'm getting at, and we talk about livability, those need to be put into quantitative terms, what that actually means. And I saw tonight, what I saw tonight was a favoring of the commercial, and I get that. I see that very important to invest in. 10% downtown vacancy rate, which is a questionable number, actually. There's a lot of reasons why that number can actually be
I'm
questioned.
going to invite you to be part of this.
I will. And I'm very familiar with that statistic and where that came from, and there's some serious questions about that 10%. But certainly, we have vacancy, whether it's 10% or less or more. We have considerable, 10% is a significant vacancy for the Main Street of any town. I mean, that's significant. If 10% of Los Angeles were vacant, that would be noticeable, you know? And it's noticeable.
It's noticeable here. It's just the buildings that are vacant are pretty much outside. You can't just take them by eminent domain.
But we can count them. We know what they are. Western Stationers.
They're the largest buildings
They're the
downtown.
largest buildings downtown.
No, they are. And there's absolutely a reason for that, because large buildings downtown are not marketable to sell or to rent. People don't want large square footage. It has nothing to do, I mean, it has something to do with the property owner, certainly, but it mostly has to do with just maintaining a property that large, what people want. They want a small gallery, they want a small retail shop, they want a real estate office. They do not want 8,500 square feet downtown. You know, there's never going to be a JCPenney's downtown again. There's never, Walmart is never going
Because
to
you don't have the car traffic, frankly.
You don't have the, and it is not the development model.
It's not the development model. And so there needs to be, all of that needs to be reconciled. And I think that we need to, again, come up with data, quantify what livability means. You know, quantify what pedestrian, when we say pedestrian, and quantify what we mean when we say we want more inhabitants in our communities, because that's ultimately, I think, what we want when we speak about community development. We want
I'm
more
really
people.
sorry, Otto, that you did not get to participate in the creation of the commercial historic residential district, because that's exactly everything that was discussed. Is what you're alluding to now. People wanting to keep it walkable, people wanting to have a mix. Now, do we have a lot of apartment spaces that could be renovated and rented out downtown? Yes, and those were not part of the count. It was commercial vacancy that the survey was done on, not on possible residential space above, and several of those buildings have that. But the benefit of the commercial historic residential was that you had that mix. and you could
Well,
maintain
but it
that.
didn't make it in here. There was nothing in here that talked about, what livability means. Livability was defined in terms of commercial spaces. You already have residential there. You already have walking. You heard that.
And we already have commercial.
And so that's why it's incumbent upon those who want to make it more traffic-oriented, because that's what we're speaking of, to come up with the data on why that's justified.
And I think a lot of it, and this goes back to why this zone is so tailored, I think a lot of it goes to what kind of development is it going to be.
Exactly.
And I mean, yeah, if you're going to put a Snappy Mart there, or frankly, even if you were going to build another grinder mill, just the way the grinder mill is built, that's probably not the kind of development that any of us want to see happen there. But you have a lot of potential, especially now with the co-op being right there down the hill from the university. If you build the right kind of commercial development, small-scale stuff, and you're building to the lot line sort of on the downtown model, and you're developing some of that on-street parking, I mean, when you're talking about the pedestrian interaction with vehicles on that street, a lot of the problem in all of these scenarios is that these streets are just far too wide. And you need to find ways, both physically, visually, and otherwise, to narrow the perception of that street, because that is the only thing that reliably brings down vehicular speeds on a street. Narrower streets equal slower speeds, period. And so if we develop the kind of small-scale development over time that activated that street as more than just a speedway up to campus and back, that is what's going to create the kind of thing that I think you're talking about, in my opinion, anyway.
Well, again, you have to do a fairly comprehensive analysis of what it means for car traffic to be pulling in and out of parking lots, because that's what's going to determine how many people actually walk down that hill. Because if they know, and pedestrians know this intuitively, and the research corroborates it, that if you walk down a street where there's a lot of traffic coming in and out, you have a good chance of getting hit.
Sure.
And we see that, in fact, even on that street. There's actually instances, as I've said. And so, there's nothing that indicates that it would become more safe. There's absolutely none. There's every indicator that it would become less safe for people walking. And that's why there needs to be actual analysis done before these kinds of zoning changes can happen, aside from the fact that we need to be thinking about one of the five, or I think what the criteria is,
7.
one of the 7.
And that's the thing is, our department doesn't have the resource or funds to do a traffic study like they've done.
Well, only traffic studies can be done by the state of New Mexico.
Right.
They're
We don't
the only
have
one that have
those
the
resources.
traffic
As much as I would
on.
love to have more resources, more analysis, we don't have that resource in our department, unfortunately, so.
Well, then you'd have to rely upon the research that's available. And the research available, again, comes back to what I've been stating. I mean, I can provide that.
Well, and again, I'm going to go back to, it all depends on what kind of development that you're talking about. I mean, what I'm envisioning is much more along the lines of what you have downtown, where the only traffic really in and out of the street is at side streets. I mean, that is the kind of cross-traffic that you have downtown. There are no parking lots. And I would see the sort of development that I would hope would happen along College Avenue would be exactly that sort of development. I mean, the ideal businesses to be situated there are businesses that are going to build on the proximity to the university, to the food co-op, to the office uses that happen at College Plaza. I mean, we're talking about small restaurants, we're talking about small retail, we're talking about things that will benefit from foot traffic and the already existing vehicular traffic. I don't think any of us are talking about, heavy commercial uses. And again, because both Commissioner Stephen and I were here as we developed this zone, this is exactly what we were hoping to achieve with this. Now, was it perfect? When you look at this as a use table, which, by the way, I hate. It's just a terrible way to try to describe something, is to try to conceive every possible thing that could ever happen and decide whether that's okay or not okay. But that's how zoning works. There's a couple of misfires, and there are going to be some things that are always going to draw people's attention, and they're going to use as a bludgeon against you, but I think we can't let these things constrain us from figuring out how we move forward as a community.
I just want to say, at the risk of extending this conversation past but I think that's a really, the original question was, were we ever going to have community input or whatnot? And I am not opposed to changing zoning. For the most part, was not pleased with the process by which it was approached this evening. I didn't think it was suitable, appropriate, whatnot. I will not say that I would not vote for the same change were the circumstances in the presentation different.
Right.
Given the presentation and the content and where we were with it, I didn't feel like it was the right move tonight. But I think that is a valid, it's harder to do, but it's a valid approach for this commission to take, to say, look, if this is something, and as we're getting to know this, if it's something we need to envision, then we should look at it, because again, like this is the slippery slope of College Avenue, of how far are you going to go? Are you going to go up to the little building across the street from, I don't know what it is, it's like I don't know, some sort of church or something. Here I am on TV saying I don't know what that thing is.
I still think it's the Baptist Student Union, but that's
what I was thinking, the student union.
It's a Christian challenge.
Right, so and that's my point, is how far up do you go? How far down do you go? How intentional is this? What are the things that were originally envisioned? Now that we have some experience with them, are there further tweaks and the further things to do? Should there be absolutely no automotive, usage, if that's going to throw people, should there be alcohol sales? I'm fine with the bar, I'm fine with it, I agree with you, it'll be hard, but it would be great, but should there be other, within this area, should we provide further guidance as far as so that it doesn't, so there are traffic calming measures, are there things like, if you're going to do that, then you have to do this? Are there ways to ensure the integrity rather than just granting a wholesale zoning change because we hope that it'll happen? And I think that's where public input process can happen, and if this is an outcome that energizes that process, absolutely great. I think that's something that we should pursue. I don't think all the information was there clearly,
No.
and I do think there should be more info and there should be a more thoughtful approach to these zoning changes. I just want to say, by the way, my interpretation is the recommendation can be made if at least one of those criteria is satisfied, but it's not that the recommendation has to be made. And I appreciate your perspective, and I do think it allows us the ability to make a recommendation.
We can't make it without.
We would at least one of the seven, which is like, okay, we can do it, at least that's going to be easy. But I think that's also why it's appropriate for us to not recommend, and it triggers the response of, okay, maybe there's a more thoughtful approach. It may take 6 months, it might take 6 years, but there is a need here to do this work. So that's why I think that could come in.
That's kind of why I was angling a little bit for the postponement there. It's just because I think if that process is going to be handled well, this is supposed to be our job.
Mm-hmm.
And what we did tonight was essentially punt it to the council. And I'm a little disappointed in us for that. And I'm not, none of that is, I think, pinned on any one person in this room. But we kind of walked into a really challenging situation here tonight.
Well, I think what it does tell, though, is that the comprehensive plan is not connecting mobility, which we've heard again and again tonight, and which the research again and again talks about, especially retirees and people that want to buy a new home, as being a factor. It's not explicit,
Right.
Instead, you have a bicycle plan, for example, that's completely severed from any connection to the reality of coexistence among different mobilities, whether it's you're in a car, you're on a bicycle, you're walking, you're on a skateboard, you're on one of these new scooters. This is not going to stop. We're just going to get faster and more intense, and we have to address it because it's a factor. It's a research-based criteria that people use to decide on whether they live here or not, and where they live, and all these other factors that we're talking about in this particular
We
case.
obviously have a passion around mobility, and we are talking about community forums. Obviously not next month or the month following, but at some point in the next 6 months or so, would you be interested, would you think about maybe developing a community forum around the issue of community mobility and what that looks like and how we could foster that?
Absolutely, I would. I would be very pleased to consider that. I don't know exactly, I'd have to
Right.
discuss that.
Yeah, no, I mean, put some thought into it. I mean, but we have, one of my favorite community forums, I guess, was sort of the discussion about what happens with Alabama Street and that whole thing. And unfortunately, not a whole lot came out of that, but I think that was a model for sort of what we could potentially do with this in reaching out and sort of identifying a problem and just initiating a conversation. I mean, we have to manage expectations from people that we by ourselves don't have any power to do anything about this. But we can raise the profile of it and begin the conversation. And we certainly can always make recommendations to the council if we come up with specific ideas that we think could be implemented. So,
I'm trying to understand the punting, that we punted it to the council by not accepting an alternative, or I'm not sure.
I would have liked to have sent it back out and gotten some of the answers to some of these questions, had some of the proponents here to talk about why they wanted it, opened it up to, I really do keep going back to the university and, some of their thoughts, and I know this dovetails very nicely with what they're trying to make happen. I would have liked to have heard from them about there was way too much process and not enough vision in this. You get bogged down in the use table, and the use table is important, but it's not everything.
Well, and then I would really like to adjourn here pretty soon.
Yeah, I know.
I'm starving.
Community forum, reports from staff. No reports from staff. Do we have any reports from the commission? All right, very good. No community input because there's no community left.
Well, on community, and I would like to input that on September 1st, downtown, we are going to have a Taste of Downtown. 17 eateries are participating, and the same day there will be shop local discounts at many of the stores. So it'll be a shop local day as well.
Where will you shop? There's all those vacancies.
I know. And 32 galleries and about 16 restaurants and a few other things down there too.
Any other community input? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.